On our last video about Mary Bennet, we got this comment: "It's great, and I love it." So, could Darcy and Bingley purchase Longbourn for the Bennet family? Even more, would Lizzie or Jane want Longbourn after they married Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley? The entail in Pride and Prejudice creates a real problem. We all laugh at Mrs. Bennet, but it's really Mr. Bennet who makes the entail a disaster. Mr. Bennet has known his whole life that if he never has a son, Longbourn will pass to Mr. Collins.
I have to dance at least the first two with Mr. Collins.
Lord, yes. He's threatened to dance with us all.
The purpose of an entail was to keep great landed estates intact from one generation to the next. If every owner could divide the family estate among heirs, many old family properties would eventually disappear. An entail prevented that by directing the estate to a predetermined line of heirs.
It is from my cousin, Mr. Collins, who, when I am dead, may turn you all out of this house as soon as he pleases,
regardless of the current owner's wishes. So, Mr. Bennet knows his 5 daughters cannot inherit Longbourn, and he knows his wife will eventually lose her home.
Oh, my dear, pray don't mention that odious man. I think it the hardest thing in the world that your estate should be entailed away from your own poor children.
Yet, throughout the novel, we see no evidence that he seriously prepares for that future. He saves very little for his daughters, appears to make no meaningful financial plan, and largely jokes about a problem that grows more dangerous every year.
Can you be a sensible man, sir?
Oh, I think not, my dear. Indeed, I have great hopes of finding him quite the reverse.
The Bennet situation is tragic, but Austen shows us that it did not become tragic overnight. It became tragic through years of inaction, and that raises an even bigger question. If Mr. Bennet couldn't simply leave Longbourn to his daughters, was the situation truly hopeless? Or was there another legal path? Was the Bennet situation truly hopeless? Not necessarily. Legal historians have long pointed out that entails in Regency England were not always permanent. There were ways they could be ended, but none of them were as simple as Mr. Bennet picking up a pen and writing a new will. The first possibility was a legal process known as docking the entail, often accomplished through what lawyers called a common recovery. Without getting lost in the legal details, the purpose of this procedure was straightforward. It could convert an entailed estate into ordinary property that could then be sold, devised by will, or settled in a new way. But there was a catch. Mr. Bennet could not accomplish this on his own. Family settlements could sometimes be rewritten or replaced with new settlements, but these agreements typically required everyone with a legal interest in the property to consent. The law was designed not only to protect the current owner, but also the people who were expected to inherit after him. The process generally required the cooperation of the next heir, in this case, Mr. Collins. But could Mr. Bennet persuade the very man who stood to inherit Longbourn to help him? And there is another complication. At the end of Pride and Prejudice, Charlotte Lucas is pregnant with the couple's first child. If that child was a boy, he would become the next generation with an interest in Longbourn. The very law that once protected Mr. Collins would now be protecting his heirs instead. Even if there was a way to break the entail, every path seems to depend on one thing: convincing someone to give up an inheritance worth £2,000 a year. Austen writes that Mr. Bennet had a falling out with Mr. Collins's father, and he barely tolerates Mr. Collins anyway.
You may imagine, sir, how happy I am on every occasion to offer those little delicate compliments which are always acceptable to ladies.
It is fortunate for you, Mr. Collins, that you possess such an extraordinary talent for flattering with delicacy. May I ask whether these pleasing attentions proceed from the impulse of the moment, or are they the result of previous study?
So, would these two men even be able to work together? Let's begin with Mr. Bennet. On paper, he has every reason to pursue it. If the entail could be broken, he might finally be able to provide lasting security for his daughters. Instead of watching Longbourn pass out of the family, he could decide who inherited it. Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia would no longer depend entirely on fortunate marriages for their futures. That sounds like an easy decision. Except it would not have been easy at all. Breaking an entail was not as simple as signing a document. It required careful planning, lawyers, legal fees, negotiations, and perhaps most difficult of all, persuading Mr. Collins to surrender the inheritance he had expected his entire adult life. Mr. Collins probably would expect a huge fortune to break the entail. If he lived another 40 years, he could expect £80,000 over his lifetime from Longbourn. He would expect Mr. Bennet to pay enough to cover that lost income, as well as the actual value of the house and land attached. It's an astronomical sum that Mr. Bennet couldn't afford, since we already know he has no money outside of the £2,000 per year. And this is where Mr. Bennet's character becomes impossible to ignore. Throughout Pride and Prejudice, Austen shows us a man who prefers avoiding problems to confronting them. He retreats to his library rather than managing his household. He laughs at Mrs. Bennet's anxieties instead of addressing their causes.
She still keeps her state above stairs, does she? Good. Then such an elegance to our misfortune. Another time I'll do the same. I'll sit in my library in my nightcap and powdering gown, and I'll give as much trouble as I can. Or perhaps I may defer it till Kitty runs away.
He knows the entail threatens his daughters, yet he appears to spend decades hoping for a son, rather than preparing for the possibility that one will never arrive.
Say nothing of that. Who should suffer but myself?
This is one of Austen's quietest but sharpest criticisms of Mr. Bennet. The law creates the danger, but Mr. Bennet allows it to become a crisis because he lacks the motivation to act before it's too late. So it's unlikely Mr. Bennet would bother trying to break the entail. But even if Mr. Bennet suddenly became determined to save Longbourn, there was still another obstacle standing in his way: Mr. Collins. At first, it is tempting to imagine Collins agreeing out of kindness. After all, he repeatedly tells the Bennets that he wishes to make amends for the hardship the entail will cause. He visits Longbourn to select a wife from Mr. Bennet's 5 daughters. Doesn't that suggest he might help them? But we also have to ask what he would be giving up. No one in Pride and Prejudice places greater importance on rank than Mr. Collins. He constantly reminds everyone of Lady Catherine's position. He speaks reverently of great estates. He measures success by status, property, and social distinction. To Collins, owning Longbourn would not merely make him wealthier, it would confirm that he had finally become the gentleman he always aspired to be. Longbourn is worth about £2,000 a year, a substantial income. It transforms Collins from the dependent younger son of a clergyman into a landed gentleman. Like Bingley, Mr. Collins hopes to become a landed gentleman, which he can achieve by inheriting Longbourn. It provides security for Charlotte, stability for their future children, and a level of social standing he could never hope to achieve through his living at Lady Catherine's. So, Longbourn is not simply an inheritance, it is the fulfilment of everything Collins has spent his life pursuing. So what would he gain by giving it away? Pretty much nothing. Then there is Lady Catherine. In Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Collins defers to Lady Catherine and does whatever she suggests. Mr. Collins imagines himself distinguished by Lady Catherine's attention. But would she encourage Collins to surrender one of the very things she values most? A landed estate passed down through generations. It is difficult to imagine her approving.
This is all extremely vexing. I'm quite put out.
Lady Catherine consistently defends hierarchy, inheritance, and the responsibilities attached to landed property. Giving away Longbourn would likely strike her not as generosity, but as astonishing foolishness. She would believe that Mr. Collins has a duty to preserve that inheritance for his own child. Selling an estate was often viewed as a sign that a family was in financial trouble. We see examples of this in other novels. In Mansfield Park, Sir Thomas must sell the living at Mansfield Parsonage living to Dr. Grant because of his son's gambling debts. In Cranford, by Elizabeth Gaskell, Lady Ludlow must mortgage her estate because her son, Septimus, is financially irresponsible. In Dr. Thorne, Squire Gresham must mortgage the Greshamsbury estate to Sir Roger because of financial irresponsibility. So, if Mr. Collins sold Longbourn, everyone would probably think he was in financial distress. Not a good look for a parson. Giving away an estate voluntarily could appear even more irresponsible. Breaking the entail would not simply mean surrendering his inheritance. It could mean giving away the wealth, status and security that his own children expected to inherit. And that makes the decision much harder than many modern readers first imagine. But let's suppose, just for a moment, that every obstacle has been overcome and the entail is broken. Longbourn can finally be sold. Now we arrive at the solution proposed by countless modern readers. Darcy simply buys the estate. At first glance it seems almost perfect. Darcy certainly has the money. By the end of the novel, he has already demonstrated extraordinary generosity toward Elizabeth's family. He quietly pays Wickham's debts, secures Lydia's marriage, and asks for no recognition in return. If anyone could afford to rescue the Bennets one final time, it is Fitzwilliam Darcy. But there is a difference between can and should. Darcy certainly can buy Longbourn, but why would he actually want to? Darcy already possesses one of the finest estates in England. Pemberley provides wealth, status, influence, and more land than he could personally oversee. Purchasing Longbourn would not transform his fortunes. Financially, it would make almost no difference. Instead, it would create another estate to manage, another group of tenants, another set of repairs, another steward, and another property requiring his attention. In other words, Longbourn solves no problem that Darcy actually has. Then there is Elizabeth. Many readers assume she would desperately want to reclaim her childhood home. Would she? Certainly she loves Longbourn. It is where she grew up. It is filled with memories of her father, her sisters, and the happiest moments of her youth. Anyone would understand wanting to preserve a place so full of personal history. But was that ever Elizabeth's goal? Throughout the novel, Elizabeth rarely worries about losing a building. She worries about losing security. Her greatest fear is that, after Mr. Bennet dies, her mother and unmarried sisters will have nowhere to live and no reliable income. The house itself is only important because it represents their future. By the novel's conclusion, that crisis has largely disappeared. Elizabeth is mistress of Pemberley, Jane is mistress of Netherfield, Lydia is married, Kitty has wealthy married sisters to rely upon. Even Mary is unlikely to be abandoned, while two sisters possess great fortunes. The Bennet women no longer face the poverty that haunted them their entire lives. So perhaps Elizabeth has no reason to recover Longbourn at all. She wanted to save her family and be happily married. She was never trying to save the house. Ironically, if anyone were interested in purchasing Longbourn, it may not be Darcy. It may be Bingley. Unlike Darcy, Bingley spends much of the novel looking for the right landed estate. Netherfield itself is only leased. He enjoys country life, and Longbourn lies only a short distance from his own home. Buying it would keep the property connected to Jane's family, allow Mrs. Bennet to remain close by if arrangements could be made, and strengthen the Bennets' ties to the neighbourhood they have always called home. In some ways, Bingley appears to be the more natural buyer. But even here, another question arises. Would he actually need it? Jane and Bingley are already wealthy. They already possess status. They already have a country house. Longbourn would be convenient, but it would not be necessary. Once the marriages have taken place, the estate that seemed worth fighting over for 300 pages may no longer be worth buying at all. The real mystery of Pride and Prejudice isn't whether the entail could have been broken. History suggests that, under the right circumstances, it may have been. The real mystery is whether anyone in Austen's story had enough reason to break it. By the end of the novel, Mr. Collins benefits from keeping Longbourn. Darcy gains almost nothing by owning Longbourn. Elizabeth no longer needs Longbourn. Jane and Bingley are already secure without it. In other words, the number of people who would actually benefit from preserving the estate becomes surprisingly small once the Bennet sisters are married. Perhaps that is Austen's final irony. The entail dominates the first half of the novel because the Bennet women face an uncertain future. But after Elizabeth marries Darcy and Jane marries Bingley, the inheritance that once seemed like the greatest problem in the story quietly fades into the background.